I mean it when I say that I think sometimes, even if you don't believe what we say, even if you don't believe in the Bible, even if you don't believe in this Jesus thing, I think that if you were to just apply the principles that we're teaching today, you could help us change the world even if you didn't want to. And I mean that. I think that there are things that the church should be doing, that the church needs to be doing better, that even if people who didn't believe like us did with us, that they would help us change the world. And so I want to challenge you today. If you're not a big Bible person, we're Bible people here because we're Jesus people, and so we believe every word of this is true. But if you're not sure about that, I want to challenge you, don't tune me out today. Listen to what I have to say and see what would happen if you applied these principles in your own life. So with that really serious introduction, I have a very important question for you. Who in this room eats Vienna sausages? Raise your hand loud and proud so we all know where to not sit anymore, okay? I have weird food habits in my life. I love hot dogs. I grew up in a poor family with a lot of kids. We ate hot dogs and macaroni 4 times a night. I could tell when mom and dad weren't doing that well because we had hot dogs 6 nights in a row. All right, this budget's getting tight around here. And I'm I don't care, man. I grew up eating Skyline chili, so I believe hot dogs are one of the gifts of God. If you eat any other kind of chili, including Gold Star, let alone spicy chili or all that other weird stuff people eat, you're the wrong person. Hot dogs are cool. Vienna sausages, however, are gross. Something about the can and the color and the texture. I try to be a little bit visual to help keep your attention, and I was going to look up pictures of Vienna sausage to put up there, and I decided that it would be so gross that most of you would tune me out, and then I got sick, just looking at pictures online. I was I couldn't handle it anymore. So Vienna sausages are gross, and my dream was almost a reality when Vienna sausage almost went out of business a couple years ago. Here's what happened. Vienna sausages have been around for I don't know how long, who cares, it's gross, but they've been around for a long time, and they've had a factory in the south side of Chicago that started out as a small factory, but as the company grew, because people have bad taste, as the company grew, the factory got bigger, and they kind of piecemealed it together, and it didn't make sense how it operated as a factory, but they just kind of kept adding on and adding on. Well, there came a time when they realized they needed to move to expand their operation. And so they sold their building on the south side of Chicago, and they built a brand new state-of-the-art stainless steel pristine facility in the north side of Chicago. And most of the workers decided to make the commute. Most of the workers decided to stick with it. And they got to the new facility, and they quickly realized something was different. They quickly realized that they couldn't quite make the sausage like they used to. They tested the water. Maybe the water they're boiling them in is different in north side than it is in the south side. It wasn't very different. They checked all of the ingredients. They checked all of the recipes. They checked all of the temperatures they were cooking. Everything they could do right. Nothing was right. They even checked, and they were still getting their goat's eyes from the same place they had been getting goat's eyes to make hot dogs before. This is the worst part. They actually, when you hear them tell the story, they'll say, the sausages didn't have the same color and the skin didn't quite snap the same when you bit into it. If that's not the grossest description of food you've ever heard, I don't know. But the skin, by the way, is lamb's bladder, so just enjoy your Vienna sausage. But what happened is they couldn't figure out, and it took almost a year and a half, and they were getting desperate, right? People who already had bad taste were complaining about how bad these Vienna sausages were starting to taste. And things weren't the same. Nothing was going right. And one night, a bunch of guys who had been there forever went out to work at a bar, went after work out to a bar, and they were sitting around telling stories, drinking, remembering the old times. And it's when they were remembering the old times that one of them brought up Irving. And Irving had been around at the old factory forever. Nobody knew when he started. He'd just been there a long time. He's one of those guys that he knows everybody, and everybody's got a nickname, and he'll stop and talk to anybody he wants. And they started to think about Irving. You see, Irving's job was to deliver the sausage to the other side of the factory. He would go through the hanging vents. That's where the pastrami pieces were hung. It was quite warm in there. He would go through the boiler room where they produced all the energy for the plant. So it was, again, a very warm room. He would go next to the tanks where they cooked the corned beef. He finally would get around the corner and then actually go up an elevator. And then he would be at the smokehouse. And it's there that he would put the sausages in the smokehouse and he would cook them. And it's there that they started to realize maybe Irving was the secret. And I think this happens more than you realize. I think what happens a lot of times in a lot of people's lives is there are these moments and days and times and people that we think, I won't miss them when they're gone, and then they leave, and you realize, oh my goodness, they had a secret. They had what I needed. Maybe for you, you work at an office and the plants all died around the office the same time that person left because they were the only one who thought to water the plants. Maybe you work at a place where there's always the one person who knows how the coffee maker works just right, and the coffee's never been the same, and the office is just getting grouchier and grouchier by the day because everybody needs more caffeine. And so you know about that person who gets missed. You know about that person who not everybody thought of at first, but when they're not there, when they're not able to help, you know that they kind of are missed. The church I grew up at was a large church, and we had many of those kind of people, but one of them who I'll never forget was Charlie. I was in high school when I found out that Charlie did what Charlie does. You see, at a large church where you take communion every week, somebody has to fill all those cups, and so Charlie was the one who was responsible for filling thousands of communion cups every week at Lakeside. The craziest part was there were staff members who had been working there for a while who didn't know that Charlie was the one who filled the cups because Charlie had grown up or had spent his adult life working shift work. And so he kind of had been naturally trained to work up in a weird shift time, and he started waking up at 2:30 in the morning, and retirement didn't do him any favors, and he just couldn't break the habit, so he kept waking up at 2:30. Well, Charlie knew that there was work to be done at the church. He knew there were communion cups to be filled every Sunday, and every Monday he knew that he needed to come in and clean all the cups that people had left in the trays after they had taken communion. And every Sunday and Monday, Charlie was in the church by 3 a.m. cleaning up the communion cups and filling the trays for the next time it was time. And no one ever knew it about Charlie until long after Charlie had passed, that Charlie was the one that did it. Because he was done by 6 or 7 a.m. and nobody else had been in the building yet. And it's guys like Charlie and it's people like Irving who help make the world go round, who do these little unspoken jobs that nobody ever knows about, that nobody ever thinks about. And today we're continuing, as we've been talking for the last couple weeks in this series called The Way. And we've been talking about what it looks like to be followers of the way. Jesus started the way in the book of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the biographies of Jesus. And then after Jesus dies, is buried, and goes to heaven, we open to the next book in the Bible, which is the book of Acts. And it's in the book of Acts that we start to see these people start the church as we know it today, the people who follow the way. And so we started talking about what it looks like for us to follow the way. And we said we need to be the kind of people who devote themselves to the teachings. And we challenged you to join us in February to read one chapter of the book of Acts every day. And today you should be reading chapter 23. If you're behind, that's okay. You've got 5 days to finish up with us. But we're going to finish the book of Acts on Thursday, Friday, whichever day the 28th is. We're going to finish the book of Acts together this week. And then we said, you know what? We can't just devote ourselves to the teaching. We also have to be people who pray. And we started talking about prayer and what that looks like in our lives. We said we can't just be people who hear the word. We can't just be people who pray the word. We have to be people who do the right thing. We talked about what it looked like for us to have integrity, for us to do the right thing. And then last week we talked about Acts chapter 5, and we talked about Ananias and Sapphira and how they were giving, but they weren't giving with the right heart and how important it was. And we told you about the Lead the Way offering. And we told you that on March 15th, we're taking up the Lead the Way offering. What we didn't tell you, and we've decided as the leadership, is on March 15th, we're not taking up a special offering and our normal offering. On March 15th, we're taking up one offering. And that one offering is going to go 100% to the 3 Lead the Way projects that we identified. It's going to go to help children in Cambodia who have been rescued from sex trafficking through our partners at Rafa International. It's going to go down the road to our friends at Health Now who offer health care to people who are uninsured and underinsured. They're looking into buying a mobile medical clinic so that they can go to people who don't have transportation and who don't have means, and we're going to help them fund this through the Lead the Way offering. And then the third thing it's going to go to is it's going to go to some capital improvements around here to help people find and follow Jesus better as a church, to improve environments, to make them more welcoming, to improve our technology, to make sure that everything we have is top-notch, to do things like improve our Facebook Live, to help all of our children's ministry and student ministry programs be able to run smoothly and efficiently, to improve some furnishings and some decor and stuff that seems little, but together those 3 projects are going to help us lead the way. And so on March 15th, we're taking up an offering, and $0 of it will go to pay an electric bill, $0 of it will go to buy donuts. All of the money goes to lead the way. And we asked you to be praying about, we asked you to be thinking about what that looks like for you, how your family can contribute, what kind of ways you can give above and beyond maybe what you normally give. And today we're talking about what it means to be a servant. Because if you read the book of Acts, if you see what happens to people who believe, what you see over and over again is people who believe serve. And a lot of times their service ends up looking very similar to the kind of guys who just push a sausage cart through a factory. And nobody notices, nobody thinks about it, but they're the kind of people who change the world. They're the kind of people who make a difference. If you want to follow along with us, we're in the book of Acts. It's in chapter 6 today. If you want to get out your Bible, it's on page 774. Or if you want to follow on the screen behind me, you can get out your phone, you can get out your Bible app. But here's what happens, right? We've been following along in the book of Acts for the last couple weeks. Right now, in chapter 6, the church is running about 5,000 people at least. We think it's probably a lot more because of the way they would count and the way they talk about numbers. But we think there's at least 5,000 people in this church, and a whole lot of them are unemployed and not from Jerusalem, where this church is. They were in town for a festival, and they heard about the way, they heard about Jesus, and they stuck around because they didn't want to leave. And so these people need help. These people need food, these people need work. And so the church is working together to try and solve all of these problems. The church at the time is being led by these 12 guys named the apostles. 11 of these guys are guys that walked with Jesus directly. One of the apostles was named Judas, but Judas betrayed Jesus, so he went elsewhere. And they replaced him with a man named Matthias who had been following. And so now there's 12 apostles. And the 12 apostles are teaching. They're leading the church. They're cleaning up afterwards. They're doing everything they can to run this place. And the apostles realize they have a problem. It happens in chapter 6, starts in verse 1. It says, "In those days, when the number of disciples was increasing, the Hellenistic Jews among them complained against the Hebraic Jews because their widows were being overlooked in the daily distribution of food." This is one of those things that it was a problem in the first century that I'm so thankful is not a problem anymore. Things like racial division. Oh, it is. But in 2,000 years ago, it was the same problem that it is now. People look at people from other countries, from other nationalities, from other places of origin, and they say, you don't get what I get. Or they say, you're getting more than I get. And so it happens. You see, there were two kinds of widows. You have to remember, widows can't work. In the first century, women couldn't work, and they had to rely on their family to support them, but most people's families were so poor they could barely support the people that they already were supporting. And so widows were often left to the church. But the Hellenistic Jews, the Greek Jews, the non-Israelite Jewish ladies were getting more attention in the eyes of the Israelite Jews because the Hellenistic Jews had been moved to Jerusalem with no family support, with no one around them. They had nothing else going for them, and all they knew was that was the church and the charity of the church. And so the Israelite Jewish widows were starting to complain. They're like, listen, those people get more than us. They get more attention than us. They get more meals than us. They get more stuff than us. And like, what's happening? And the issue was there just wasn't enough help to go around. And the issue was it was a division amongst racial lines, but more than that, it was a division of there just wasn't enough help. And so the apostles get together and they realize the answer to this is service. And the answer to this is people pitching in. And here's what happens, right? There starts to be resistance when you start talking about service in the church. When you start talking about helping, everybody starts to tune out. Like, the pastor's up there because he doesn't want to do the work himself. He's going to find somebody else to do the jobs he doesn't want to do. Heard this one before. Y'all, this isn't like me standing up here saying, I need somebody to shine my shoes on Sunday. I don't even shine my shoes. Like, this isn't us like, hey, Lawrence needs someone to tune his guitar so that his fingers are nice and ready for guitar playing. When we talk to you about serving, we're talking about what it looks like for us as a church to help people find and follow Jesus. We're talking about what it looks like for us as a church to serve to a point that meets the needs of the people around us. We're talking about what it looks like for us as a church to give all we have to meet the needs of the broken and the hurting around us. It drives me crazy that there are hundreds of churches in this county, and I just found out today that there are more foster children in Madison County than in any other county in the state of Kentucky. It blows my mind that there are dozens and dozens of churches in this county, and there are more homeless people here per capita than almost any county in the state. There are at least 65 churches in Madison County that average over 100 people in weekly attendance. And there are 65,000 people in Madison County alone who don't know Jesus. So you can tell me that we don't need people to serve, but I can tell you that there is a major, major need. So here's what happens is the apostles, they see the need. And it says in verse 2, so the 12 gathered all the disciples together, and they said, it would not be right for us to neglect the ministry of the word of God in order to wait on tables. And I see this moment happens where like you can see where people get worried, right? Like you can see the apostles saying, listen, we're the preachers, we're not serving tables anymore. But you have to keep in mind that 2,000 years ago, there were about 12 people who spent every day with Jesus for the 3 years he did ministry. Those were the only people who knew what he said. Those were the only people who knew what he did, what he taught. There wasn't a lot of written record. There wasn't a lot of seminary courses going around. There were just a few people. So their job was all the time teaching people. And instead of being able to teach people, they found themselves waiting on tables and serving widows and giving them food. And so what they do is they call this group of leaders together and they say, listen, we're spending a lot of time waiting on tables, and we're not spending as much time as we should teaching and preaching. And it's not to say that waiting tables was a job that was beneath them. But amongst the 5,000 or so people in this church, there are some other people who could wait on tables with them. And it was a plenty mighty and noble task, but it wasn't a task that they had to take on themselves. And so they invite some people to come alongside them. They invite some people to serve with them. And they say, listen, we are charged with teaching. We need you to help with serving. It says, brothers and sisters, choose 7 men from among you who are known to be full of the Spirit and wisdom. We will turn this responsibility over to them, and we'll give our attention to prayer and the ministry of the word. And what they say is, listen, everybody's going to have a job. Some of you, your job is going to be waiting tables. For us, our job is prayer and ministering of the word. For us, our job is teaching and preaching. And what they say and what they're trying to tell them is, listen, everybody's designed differently. Not everyone can teach. Not everyone can preach. Not everyone can sing. Not everyone can do math. Not everyone can eat Vienna sausages. Some of you are normal, right? Like it just is the way it goes. And so they have this conversation, and I love this because what's happening at this moment in the first century, somewhere else in town, there's a guy named Paul. And Paul is not happy about this movement called the Way. And we're still in chapter 6 of Acts, so at this point, Paul is doing what he can to snuff it out. He's going door to door trying to kill Christians. He's going door to door trying to stop the church. And the church at the same moment is going, how do we reach more people? The church at the same moment, Paul is bearing down on them. The church is going, how do we change this? Well, about 3 chapters from now, in chapter 9, you're gonna see Paul change his life drastically because Jesus confronts him on a road. And it's after Jesus confronts him on the road and Paul changes his life that Paul writes this, which is similar to what happens in Acts chapter 6. He says, even so, the body is not made up of one part, but of many. He says, now if the foot should say, because I'm not a hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the ear should say, because I'm not an eye, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason stop being part of the body. If the whole body were an eye, where would the sense of hearing be? If the whole body were an ear, where would the sense of smell be? But in fact, God has placed the parts in the body, every one of them, just as he wanted them to be. If they were all one part, where would the body be? As it is, there are many parts, but one body. And when Paul writes this in 1 Corinthians 12, he's going back to that moment when they start appointing people to serve. What I find interesting and really in my situation so hopeful is that what Paul is writing there is a joke. Like when people heard that in the first century, they would be rolling in the aisles laughing at the idea of a foot saying to a hand. And so now Paul knows my pain, what happens when jokes just go completely over people's head. But what Paul is saying here is like you see the logic of it, right? Not only can your foot not talk, your foot can't make its own sense of anything. So for your foot to say to your hand, I don't need you, that doesn't make sense. But he's saying, listen, a body without a foot is bad news. And so there are people who their job is to literally be the hands and feet. There are people who their job is to do the things that nobody else may ever notice. Like, for example, if you're drinking coffee right now or you ate a donut or you will eat a donut, is a group of people who you may never know who they are, who are responsible every Sunday for bringing those things. Today, before you walked into this room, there was a group of people who met at 9 a.m. on the prayer team, and they walk through the entire building, and they pray for every seat, they pray for every room, they pray for every person that God would move and that God would show them how things go, or that God would show them who he is. The band doesn't just walk up and start playing those songs. Every Wednesday night, they practice for upwards of 2 hours to make sure that they get everything right so that they can do the best they can to lead you in song closer to Jesus. If you've ever donated anything to our Grace Now card out front, you don't think that magically just disappears. You know that there's someone who comes in every Monday and who faithfully takes all of those things and stocks them over at Grace Now and works every Monday night at Grace Now to give our friends and our neighbors who are struggling, to give them what they need. And these are jobs that you could think maybe make someone seem insignificant. They're jobs that you could think maybe aren't as important as other jobs. Every Sunday, there's at least one person who walks around the building with the sole intent of making sure that every person in the building is safe and secure. Every Sunday, there's a group of guys who take turns taking communion to people who couldn't be here because they're elderly and shut in. There are people who do jobs around here that you don't even know. And you might think that those jobs seem insignificant, but those jobs are the kind of jobs that change everything. We see in verse 5 that the proposal pleased the whole group. They chose Stephen, a man full of faith and the Holy Spirit. They also chose Philip, Prochorus, Nicanor, Timon, Parmenas, and Nicholas from Antioch, a convert to Judaism. They presented these men to the apostles, who prayed and laid their hands on them. And what they did in this moment is they empowered everyone to serve. They empowered everyone to do a job. And this is where it all changes in Acts 6. Everything becomes different. Where it stops being just the apostles leading everything, and it starts being the church working, walking, leaving, moving together. And so this is something where we're going to draw our own line in the sand. And I'm going to start asking you this question. What's your job? Not what do you do for a living, not what did you do before you retired, but I'm going to start asking you, what's your job? How do you help? How are you furthering the mission of us helping people find and follow Jesus? How are you a part of the vision of helping us see thousands of people find hope and help in following Jesus? What's your job? It's an expectation that if you're a part of our church, you serve. I used to think that the world would be a better place if everybody was like me. My wife tells me that's not true. But I started to think about what if really everyone was like me. I was like, man, there would be tacos and parties for days. What more could people ask for? But then I started to think there wouldn't be tacos for days because somebody would forget to order the tortillas, the cheese, and the meat that make tacos so essentially delicious. And there might be parties, but somebody would have forgotten to send out the invitations because I probably would have made a really cool list of people I wanted to come to the party, but I'm not going to remember to write out invitations and mail them. And it will be a really cool party until about 3 months from now when KU comes and turns off my electric because I forgot to pay the electric bill. And so no, the world is not better with a lot of me. I'm aware of this. I'm aware that there are people who do different things and do different jobs. Almost every survey that's ever been taken of American people, the number one fear they have? Anybody shout it out? It's funny that no one will shout it out because the number one fear of most Americans is public speaking. Number 2 fear is usually death, which I find funny that most of you would rather die than do my job. To be honest, if you're like an accountant or a numbers person or somebody who works in a cube all day by themselves, I'd rather die than do your job, so we're even. But there are some of you who love numbers, who are passionate about details and organizing. There are some of you who just thrive on spreadsheets. And the only reason I have spreadsheets is because I don't know how else to do things. And if I couldn't do spreadsheets, I'd be a happy man. There are some of you who could not do what I do ever. And I'm okay with that because I couldn't do what you do. And if you're passionate about numbers, if you're passionate about details, if you're passionate about organization, we have spots for you. Every Sunday, there's multiple people who work in the tech booth back there running the sound machine. That's not what it's called. The sound board. See, I don't even know what it's called. Running ProPresenter, running our computer. After the Lead the Way offering, who will be running our Facebook Live and Internet Campus like we've never had it going before. Then we need people on our First Impressions team who help people walk in the door and feel comfortable. I have a friend who wanted to come to visit our church. and sat in the parking lot for 2 weeks because they weren't sure they'd be allowed in. And that's the kind of person who needs a first impressions member walking through the parking lot, just waving and saying, "We're glad you're here this morning." I know people who are passionate about planning and organizing in details, and all of those words kind of make me think I just ate Vienna sausages. And so we need to form the party planning committee, or the PPC if you're a fan of The Office. We need to form the PPC. If you're not a fan of The Office, you probably like Vienna sausages, so whatever. People to help us throw bigger and better parties than ever before. We need people who are organized, people who are detailed, people with context, people who can help us do these things. We need people to help us with our creative team. You may have noticed we've had crates and candles and pallets on this side for like maybe 10 years. And I love them, and they're pretty, but we got to find some ways to change the way things look. We got to find ways to change the stage. We got to find ways to change our service order. We got to find ways to be more creative. So we're building a creative team to help us not get stuck in the same ruts of things that we do. We have a missions team that is literally a group of people who are passionate about seeing us expand our reach beyond Richmond, beyond Madison County, who's seeing it go across the globe. And there's some of y'all that don't agree with that, and I'm cool with that. Don't be on the missions team. There's plenty of need here. You can help us with the needs here. But if you're passionate about overseas and you're passionate about reaching third world countries, join the missions team. Kind of like on this random whim that we don't even understand. We started a special needs ministry, and we're having a special needs family night of worship in April, and we don't even know what this looks like yet. But if you want to join that team, if you want to be a part of that, then join that team and be a part of it. You have to have a job. Here's the deal. I say these kinds of things a lot, but whatever. This is not a church growth strategy. If you read most things about church growth, it's changing and evolving a little bit. But if you read most things about church growth, what they're going to tell you is that you're going to want to make people as comfortable as possible. And you're going to want to make sure that people know you're glad they're there and that you're happy to have them, and don't expect too much out of them. It doesn't work that way here. I couldn't care less about growing the church. I care a whole lot about reaching people who don't know Jesus, and I care a whole lot about being followers of the way who serve. Because I'm telling you, there's 65,000 people in this county that don't know Jesus, and there's 65,000 people that don't care if we have fog machines and laser lights or a giant pipe organ behind us. There's 65,000 people that don't care whether we sing a song written by Chris Tomlin or whether we sing a song written by Martin Luther. But they want to see, and they need to see, a group of people who make a difference in the lives of other people. And so here's what I'm going to tell you. There's no free rides around here. Just showing up isn't good enough. Just being in attendance and dropping some money in the basket as it goes by isn't cutting it. If you want to be a follower of the way, if you want to take that second step after finding Jesus, of following Jesus, you have to have a job. And you have to be doing something. And it's not easy. It's actually, I promise you, this is going to sound crazy to you. It is more work for the paid staff here to empower volunteers than it would be to just do most of it ourselves. It's harder on us to empower and to train and to celebrate and to do all the things it takes to run volunteers than it would be to just do all the things that we do ourselves. Because I know some of you right now are like, well, if we're all volunteers, then why do we pay any ministers? But what matters is it's harder on us to get you to do jobs, but we can't do what we need to do. We can't reach more people unless we all start pitching in and doing a job. And I promise you, I can tell you the number 65,000 until I'm blue in the face, but I can also tell you this. 65,000 people don't need you to do a job, but there's one person who does. There's one neighbor, there's one friend, one coworker, one child who needs you to be serving in a capacity you never thought possible, who needs you to be giving in a way you never thought. We have all kinds of opportunities around here to serve. Every Tuesday night for the next 6 or so more weeks, we host Room at the Inn. And every Tuesday night, we need volunteers to stay the night. And I know that some of you will say, well, I got work, I can't do it. Like, man, when I do it, I get 4 hours of sleep, which really, depending on the mood of my children, isn't that out of the norm for me. Maybe what you can do, you can't stay overnight, but you can serve a meal. You can serve on cleanup team. Maybe for you that's not your thing, and maybe what you need to do is you need to go downstairs and see Steve, Terry, and Kim and say, how do I start helping you teach kids? How do I start helping you with the kids down here? Maybe you go across the parking lot and you say to Jeremy, how do we help with the teens? How do we help? How do we serve? How can I help you behind the scenes? I don't know what it is for you, but I know that there is a job that you can do and that you need to do and that we need you to do for us to get where we want to go. Because look what happens when everybody starts serving in chapter 6. Verse 7 says, the word of God spread. The number of disciples in Jerusalem increased rapidly, and a large number of priests became obedient to the faith. I'm telling you, it's not going to be because the band has more people in it. It's not going to be because my sermons get better, because this is as good as they get. It's not going to be because we wear cooler things to church. If we're going to reach people for Jesus, it's going to be because we're serving people who give and give and give. And even if sometimes means we end up like Irving. You see, because it was at a bar in the north side of Chicago. That was loud.
Can you talk about bars in church?
This is awkward.
I said bars.
Talk amongst yourselves about your favorite flavor of Vienna sausage. So anyways, it was at a bar in the north side of Chicago when the security team had a heart attack. It was at a bar in the north side of Chicago when they realized Irving's walk was the secret. Before Irving, there were other men who had the job, and they were the real secret. There was no maze of hallways. There was no half-hour trip where the sausage would get warm before they would cook it. In the new plant, they just stuffed the sausages in a cold room and took them and cooked them in the smokehouse next door. Irving's trip was the secret. It's what made the hot dogs red. It's what made the skin snap. It was so secret, even the guys who made the sausage didn't realize it. So in the new factory, they created a special smokehouse where after creation, all the sausages would go and rest for a time in a heated room before returning to the cooker. And they named it Irving's Corner. And so here's the deal for you. You might take on a job that you think is menial. You might sign up today to serve in a way you think nobody will ever notice, but here's what might happen. You might get to heaven, and you might see that everything is different. You might walk in the first day, and somebody will come up and say, you don't know this, but it's because of a lesson you taught my sister when you were teaching children's church. You don't know this, but it's because you were with us on this trip. You don't know this, but it's because you said, it's because you helped, it's because you were. And all of a sudden you realize that you are Irving and you did this job that nobody noticed, that nobody thought anything about, but you helped change somebody's eternity. It's possible for you to be a part of that. So as you walked in today, you got a bulletin. Hopefully, if the people out front were doing their job, you got a bulletin. And you may notice that on the backside of that is different this week. On the backside of that, there's like 9 or 10 options for you to check. If you have another idea, if you have something else, if we miss something, write it on there too. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to write your name on there. And I want you to say either I am serving here and I want to continue and check it off, or say this is where I need to start serving. This is where I'm ready to start helping. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to take up an offering. And when we pass the bags, you can put them in there, and we'll go through them this week. The right people who need to enlist your help will get the cards, and we'll go from there. Because here's the deal. From this point on, I need to be able to ask you 2 questions, and you need to be able to ask each other these 2 questions anytime you see each other, anytime you want. These are the 2 questions I need you to be able to answer at all times. Who is your one? You already know this, right? Easter's coming up. We're going to be asking you like crazy. Who's your one? Who are you inviting with you on Easter? Who are you inviting? Who are you inviting? Who's your one? And the other question we want to be able to ask you, and we want you to be able to ask each other is, what's your job? What do you do around here? How do you serve? How do you help? And if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're a committed believer in Jesus and his death, burial, and resurrection, if you consider yourself a part of this church, I hope you can answer that question. And if you can't, today's the day that you're going to sign up. And we'll reach out to you this week, and we'll make sure that you have a job. Because there are 65,000 people, and there is one who are counting on you. After we dismiss the service today, I need to tell you this. I'm over time, but I'm going to tell you anyway. After we dismiss the service today, Kylan Cox is going to get baptized. And one of my favorite things in the world is when I don't baptize people. Because somebody else does. And today, Kylan's going to get baptized by Bill Beard. And Bill Beard has served faithfully as an elementary school principal, as a church elder in the church they came from, as a teacher, as a friend. And today, Kylan Cox is going to walk in the baptistry with Bill. And it's because of the influence of people like Bill that Kylan's going to give his life to Jesus. And I'm so thankful for guys like Bill, who has toiled and worked and served for as long as he can. And I'm so thankful that today Kylan gets to know Jesus. And it's because of Bill. It's because of his service. And there are people in your life, people in your family who are waiting for you to make that same step, to make that same change. As the offerings passed, if you came prepared today to give by cash or check, if you came today to not to give, the good news is just put your card in and sign up. Maybe you can't give us money, but you can give us time. We'll take it. There are too many people here who don't know Jesus for us to sit and be happy with where we are. Will you pray with me? Father God, we bow before you. We humble ourselves to you. We ask you in this moment that you would open our eyes, that you would open our hearts, that you would open our minds to who you are and to why you've made us. Help us to see your design in our lives. Help us to see how we can serve you. It's in your precious name we pray. Amen.